All right, everyone. It is 6 o'clock on Sunday evening. We are in the process of starting our live webinar, our coaching webinar. So I wanted to quickly do a agenda overview before we get started, but I want to make sure everybody's in the right place. So a little housekeeping. First things first, you should be on the week 3 core beliefs. Is what we're talking about tonight, and this is basically section 4 of the Udemy course, Mastering the Law of Attraction. So hopefully everybody here is on the call is actually in the right place at the right time. If you are not, this would be the time to exit the call. And if you are, that's fantastic. Welcome to the call. Make sure you have a pen and paper ready. You can, of course, leave questions if you'd like during the call. You can always follow up with questions on the discussion board through Udemy or shoot me a message. So those are the ways to contact me with questions. I've got a couple questions at the end of the night that we're going to go over that have already been provided. So we will move forward tonight with our next slide here. All right. So our agenda tonight, rebuilding your core beliefs is the primary uh, topic of discussion this evening. And then we're going to go next after that to a little accountability challenge, if you will. Now, it's just a little something for hopefully to kind of engage those who are in the process of making these changes to really take that step and start to look at your core beliefs and utilize the tools, to make sure that you're making those changes. So it's a way for us to engage with each other. We'll be using not only the discussion boards, but the Facebook group. So either way, whichever those that you frequent the most, you'll be able to utilize that to make your accountability known. So, and then last tonight we'll be doing a brief Q&A, just a few questions that we'll be reviewing unless anything else comes up during tonight's call. So without further ado, let's get started. All right. So when we talk about rebuilding your core beliefs, sometimes that might be a little challenging or even perhaps frightening for some people. We have come to rely on our beliefs. And for the most part, I would say that most people find that their beliefs, have held them well through the years. But there are some that have gotten you perhaps to places where you're feeling stuck or limited. And the idea of tonight's call really is to look at these next few weeks and recognize how they're designed to help you rebuild your core beliefs so that they are helping you to overcome limitation or even to embrace a new idea of what is possible in your life that you might not have had the opportunity or the wherewithal in the past to look at. So the first it's twofold. The first half of it, I guess, would be the knowing, right? The knowing, the sense of knowing. And the second would be testing those beliefs. So on one side, we have a sense of knowing what we believe is true. And on the other side, we have, as we grow, right, and as we change, the challenge of testing those beliefs and basically, looking at them with a a keener eye, if you will, and asking tougher questions to ensure that even though, we've held a belief for a long time, it really does still serve us. It's still providing us with the fuel we need to make progress in our lives. So in week 7, we're talking about reverence. What does that mean? Ideally, by now you have kind of gotten into a rhythm with the program, and that includes doing your daily thank you list, doing your visualization, being on track as far as looking at, either using the goal tracker to ensure that you're making strides and steps every day towards your goals. So, with all of those components, how are you staying in process? How are you staying connected to your end result goal? So that's really when we talk about being reverent, we're talking about really kind of coming into the program and in a way, giving yourself to it, right? Giving yourself over to the idea of making these changes. So perhaps up to this point, you might have had one foot out the door, or maybe one foot, one toe in the pool, if you will. And right now, we're asking in this week 7 for you to really just jump in, to take it on fully, to really get into the program so that you can feel yourself making these changes, so that you can be aware that the change is happening and that you can embrace it. So, of course, that requires that you stay the course, literally, that you are again doing your visualizations. And, this is a good time to remind everyone what is a visualization. I actually had a client one day, probably about 4 cycles back, if you will, 4 groups back, that was really stuck with this idea of visualizing that goal. And I really had not up to that point recognized that that might be a challenge for somebody, just the idea of what it takes to visualize success. So I was kind of thrown by the question when she'd asked me on the call, but I remember thinking, it's obviously was possible for her, for people not to really understand or have an experience, right? A belief that they're just thinking about something could make it so. So how do we know? How do we understand? How can we incorporate in our own minds the idea that what we think about literally is what we bring about? So, I like to share this example, if you will, of how we can use visualization and how most people understand inherently that we have that power, that we are empowered with the idea of creating something just by thinking about it. So if I were to take a group of you, and I'm not, so just, bear with me, kind of think about this from a side, but if I were to take a group of you and say, okay, I want you to think about the worst possible disease you could even imagine, and I want you to think about yourself having it. I want you to think about it being in your body and how that would feel. And as I start to think about that, you start to recognize where it would be in your body, how it would affect your day-to-day life and things like that. If I were to say that, which of course I'm not to you, all of you listening, but if I were, what do you imagine the response of that group would be? And I will tell you, I have done this before in groups. When we first started, this is one thing that we brought up. And everybody to a T would say, absolutely not. I'm not going to do that. I mean, no way, right? Why would they? So as soon as I get them to understand that the very fact that they have a sense that thinking about something bad happening or negative happening or physical illness being manifested would possibly create it, right? So they've already given me the indication that they understand and recognize that that is a bad thing to do, that you don't want to do that. Well, if you don't believe in visualizations being effective, then why would you care? Well, clearly, inherently, they knew better. So it's interesting enough on one side to think that we could accept, right, believe that the negative side of it is true, right, that the negative aspects of manifestation through visualization were true. However, it seemed to be a greater leap for them to say the opposite then therefore is true, right? Because if one side of the coin is true, the other side is true as well. So if that same power to visualize a negative happenstance existed and they could accept that and believe that, then therefore they should also be able to accept and believe that the opposite, which would be a positive experience, a positive reaction, a manifestation of something good in their life, was equally possible. So when we talk about visualization, that's what we're talking about. And hopefully for any of you out there that, couldn't really get your brain around the feeling of visualizing, and for some people it takes kind of creating that whole sense of the experience. So one of the challenges might be that if I say visualization, you don't really have a sense of what it looks like per se. But if I were to say to you, how would you feel? How would it feel in your body to know that you have $1 million in the bank? How would you what would you do? What activity would you be doing? How would you be using your body? Perhaps that would be more of a catalyst for you. And part of this comes back to what we talked about, I believe last week, as far as, when we talk about neurolinguistic programming, we talk about, our lead representation system. So it could be visual, could be kinesthetic, which is like physical, could be olfactory. So what would these smells be? Let's say, for example, you wanted to travel. What kinds of things would you smell? Would it be wildflowers? Would it be the warm earth under your feet in the desert? Would it be lush greenery from, tropical jungles? So we could then kind of fill in the gaps by utilizing all those senses. So the key when you're looking at visualizing is to make sure that you're basically creating a three-dimensional picture, if you will, in your mind of that goal being achieved. And really start to play with the things that not only once you've talked about them in kind of in your own mind, but that you've recognized an extra energy, an extra excitement build up with you when you really get the right sensation attached to it. So if, for example, you are a kinesthetic person and you can hear the bells of St. Mary's, right? That you're traveling to this wonderful cathedral. And it's not so much the sound of the crowds and things like that. Perhaps it's the feeling, that resonating um, hum in your heart, if you will, uh, when the bells toll. So get connected on whatever level makes sense to you. And my suggestion is always to start with as many as possible, as many of the senses as possible, to kind of fill in the picture, if you will, and therefore create a stronger draw, a stronger energetic pull to whatever part of you is kind of the leader on your representational system. And that would be the first step. Of course, hopefully at this point you've been kind of creating some sort of visualization each day when you go to bed or get up around each of those goals, those 5 to 7 core goals that you're working on. Then you also want to make sure that you're taking time. And so for some people that means, meditating or just reviewing your list so that you're really spending some time every day on getting very clear about what you're doing here. Why are you even doing this in the first place? So you want to stay connected to the goals that you have before you. Oftentimes when people are in the middle of the program, things start happening really fast. So you can kind of become overwhelmed if you start to chase things rather than let them come to you. In other words, you don't want to start racing off after one specific goal per se and leave all the other 7 or 6 unattended, if you will. So you want to always kind of have a spot in your day that you're really almost objectively looking at where you're going, and then, as I said, dropping into each one and getting connected, taking as much time as you can and need to really flesh out and hone that goal so that you really have a sense of it. You really can hear for yourself in your own mind what that goal means to you. So take that time, and be aware of not only kind of where you're connecting to that goal, but where it's leading you. And that, I think, is another piece of the idea of reverence. We can be dogmatic and just be, kind of blinded to moving forward in the goal. So certain people might find themselves in quote unquote the type A personality that want to just get to the end result. But be aware of all of the little occurrences that are happening, the synchronicities, the feelings, the emotions that are happening as you move along, right? Be aware of the journey, be present in the journey, so that you can really appreciate it and get a deeper connection of understanding the skill of manifestation, right? Really let it be clear for you that you're creating this for yourself, that this is not just some crazy happenstance per se, but that this is you effectively stepping into your own power and bringing right into fruition those things that you want to manifest. And then in week 8, we talk about going that extra step, new heights, right? This is about stretching. So as you've gotten along in your goals, let's say by now you've maybe reached a couple of them. You've made some goals that perhaps originally when you started the program felt really far off and a bit of a reach. But now that you've kind of gotten comfortable with the process and you're starting to kind of be able to create more flow in your life, it's time to push those limits. It's time to stretch a little bit. This is like the 7th inning stretch, if you will. Really start to look at your goals, go back to your master goal list, for example, and look for that kind of goal that you put on there, let's say, uh, as almost a whim, thinking, sure, that'd be great if that ever happened. That's the goal that now, as you've kind of created some momentum for yourself, you want to get, you pull it out and put it down on that paper and make that one of your next goals. So you should be, reviewing your list every week and looking for things that you've either, achieved, obviously, or perhaps goals that after kind of reviewing them, as we talked about last week, you've decided to kind of set aside for other things. And in their place, right, and in that extra space on your sheet, for example, you'll be putting something new. Well, my suggestion for what would that be would be something on your list right now that is a stretch, something that's really going to ask you to up level your game, to really start to move into embracing the idea of possibility even more than you have to this point. So that's when we talk about new heights, right? Going beyond what you've even known to this point and stretching even further past perhaps your comfort level per se. And when we look at what a comfort level is, we have to maybe be, again, a little bit more objective, kind of stand back and really ask if we're pushing ourselves as far as we can. Are we really embracing the idea of what is possible? And as I mentioned in week 1, currently I'm kind of reviewing the holographic universe and kind of reviewing some of the great ideas and philosophies there. And just in reading it the other day, came across a example of the fact, I guess I shouldn't say the fact, the premise, if you will, that there is no separation in the universe, that all of the things in the universe exist at some level equally and all at once. And when they talk about the holographic universe, one of the things they talk about is how, in a hologram, you point a light in a specific way at this piece of paper, and that's when you actually can reveal that the film, that hologram. So that you basically, it's dependent upon how you're actually looking or focusing that light. Well, I would say the same is true now in the idea of where you're focusing your idea of what it means to attain new heights. Perhaps you've not lifted your eyes high enough yet. And this might be a good opportunity to take the time and look at your goals and ask yourself, if, just if, I were to allow myself to think of anything being possible, what would that look like? Where would you be? How would you know you were there? What would it feel like to stand in your shoes at that level? Just think about that for a moment, if you will. What does it mean for you to find a new height for your life? Now, I'm going to prescribe that that's different for everyone. Everyone on this call has a different idea of where their comfort level is now, where they've stretched to this point, and even beyond that, what could possibly be possible, right? Possibly be possible. So now we want to move into the possibility land. We want to move into the idea of being comfortable with opening to new possibility. So week 8 is really about starting to uncover what that looks like for yourself. So this part of it is getting used to, again, with week 7 and week 8, a sense of knowing, kind of internally connecting to what our core beliefs are. And then the next step, of course, is to challenge that. And so in week 9 and week 10, we start to look at moving past those existing boundaries, existing beliefs, and pushing into hopefully brand new territory, especially in the idea of creating abundance. So in week 9, when we talk about creating abundance, you know, it's my favorite thing to teach, abundance. As I've mentioned before, and as you can read in the book, I literally lived on the street with nothing. And I look around my life now, and it's hard to even reconcile sometimes those two existence, those two lifestyles. But they are lifestyles. And I've come to appreciate, respect, honor, and choose to live the lifestyle I live now. It doesn't mean that I do not respect, honor, and appreciate the lifestyle I lived before, because I know that it brought me here. By recognizing where I was, I had made a choice never to be there again. And so I take steps on a regular basis to make sure that that's the case. So one big key and one big factor was becoming comfortable with money in all of its forms, in all of its fashions, and then moving beyond that, right? So my next limit, my next stretch was not just being comfortable with having money, but having a lot of money. And then having so much money that I had a lot of money and then still more money. So I don't know if anybody else is getting nervous out there now, and I'd say this, think about that. Having money, the idea of making enough to make ends meet, and then moving beyond that to having all of that money and even more money so that I could, quote unquote, do some fun things, right? And then moving beyond that to say, not only do I have enough money to make ends meet, but I have money to make ends meet and do what I want to do and still have more money on top of that. What does that look like? How does that feel to think about that? Does it sound crazy? Maybe. Maybe to some of you it does. And maybe, interestingly enough, maybe not only does it sound crazy, but maybe it doesn't sound good. Maybe it sounds greedy. Maybe it sounds painful. Maybe it sounds challenging. As you look at those reactions that you're having from that statement of having enough to having more than enough to having even more than you'd ever need in a lifetime. Think about that. Does that push any buttons? Does that raise any flags in your mind? Does that create an image of a person who is greedy, nasty, mean, horrible, whatever? Some corporate lord. What does that mean? Or does it mean a wonderful benefactor who's able to create amazing things with all that extra income, with all that extra flow of money, that they all spend it on not only themselves, but on those they love and those who they care about, and areas and worlds and cities and functions, and even perhaps strangers, to make things better for others. I would challenge you that if, while I was just talking through that, you had anything less than positive pop up in your mind, a belief about those people, right? That you would write that down. This is a time when you're having your notebook and your pen comes in handy. Write those thoughts down because in a moment when we do our exercise and we go over the challenge, that will be something that I would highly recommend you go deeper into to understand that belief. In the video for week 9, I talk about the example of someone who is raised in a home where the idea of having money is vilified. Perhaps the parents themselves are struggling financially, and yet they might have somebody who's close to them, a relative, or maybe a neighbor, or a kid at school whose parents are also really well off, and yet your parents are struggling. So as a child, perhaps that brings up feelings of lack and frustration and envy and all of these negative emotions. And yet we kind of can go back to the idea of what we think about, we bring about, right? So if we're creating a belief about money that is negative and perhaps even evil, then how can we manifest something that goes against our own beliefs about what's right and true and just for us? Because the challenge is that our beliefs are there to serve us, to serve our sense of what our greater good is. So if we believe that having money is evil, then we are going to continually have a financial struggle. So even those people that perhaps will, win the lottery or, get a huge promotion, that they will be the people in this scenario that would either lose the money, let's say they gamble or they buy all kinds of crazy stuff as soon as they get the money because they just can't have it. Their internal belief system says that it is bad to have extra money. When the opposite could equally be true. It could be amazing to have extra money. It could be a lifesaver to have extra money. It could be the best thing in the world to be absolutely recklessly abundant with tons of money to have, share, and spend and save. But the belief behind either of those things is really what's going to drive our behavior. And ultimately, even if we, kind of try to strong arm ourselves into making more money or becoming more abundant, we're going to hit that same wall psychologically and fall backwards until we recognize where that core belief is challenging us and do something different, right? Rebuild a new belief about money and about abundance. And some of the ways that we can do that is, to manifest money, to start to play with the idea of manifesting money and looking at money not only just in the physical form of dollars and cents, but also in the form of gifts and trips and extra time and, somebody buying you lunch or dinner, to see that the flow, right, of that energy of abundance can literally be from everywhere, from every direction. And as we do that, then we can start to acknowledge it and appreciate it and call it good. Call it good in all those forms. And sometimes for people, that physical money, right, that dollars and cents money is harder than accepting gifts and tokens and lunches and meals and, found money, for example. Somebody can find $20 in their own pocket that's been there for a long time and not even recognize that a moment ago they didn't have that $20. Not consciously anyway. And then when they find it, now they have $20. So they're $20 richer, right? There's abundance. And we really have to start to look at all those avenues of abundance happening in our lives and then appreciate it and then say that that's good. Call it good. Call it what we want it to be so that we can continue to manifest more of it, right? Manifesting the good instead of the evil. And that can be a challenge that, we just skirt around sometimes when we talk about money. There's so many hangups that can happen for people that when we get down to the core of it, it doesn't really matter why per se, but what the belief is. So understand the belief so that you can change it. So that it's not limiting, right? But that it is helpful in creating more abundance for you. So if a belief is holding you back and not supporting you and growing and expressing more in your life, then that's going to be where the red flag should come up and you should be looking at it a little harder and making a change about it. And then lastly, as far as testing goes, we have to become comfortable in our own skin. We have to start to recognize in week 10 that we talk about expressing your nature, your truest self, the you underneath, around, and through all of this garbage belief. Because those negative beliefs, they aren't you, they're what you've become accustomed to. But underneath them, there's the core of who you are as a human being that you are here to express, that you're here to be present in the world. Your voice, in other words, what you believe and feel in your heart and the core of who you are, is here to be expressed. So whatever that form that takes, for example, that's what you really want to spend your energy on. You want to spend your energy on being real. And if you're in a situation, if you're in a relationship situation or a job situation or a friendship situation where you're not allowed or it doesn't feel safe to be present and be purely who you are, then I would challenge you to recognize that that is something that needs to change, that you need to allow yourself to find a space where you can be yourself. You can be who you are. You can express your real thoughts, your real ideas, your real feelings about what you want to have and be and where you want to go in your life. And that's part of that testing process, right? To test the boundaries of where you're being yourself and where you're not, where you're holding back, where you're quieting your own voice. When you have that gut feeling about making a change or standing up for something or reaching for something, let's say you're in a boardroom and you have a brilliant idea, but you're not sure that people will respect your idea because you're not one of the quote unquote in crowd or the, upper echelon, the VPs, et cetera. But something inside of you is telling you that the idea you have is valuable. When you can get to the place where you speak the idea, trusting that whatever happens after that is not your problem, then that's when you know you're really being true to your own nature. Because it shouldn't be about receiving a reward for it. It should be about expression. It should be about releasing it. Whatever happens afterwards is not your concern. It's simply your job to be really clear and let your light shine. And trust that whatever the reason is behind it, it will come to pass. It will make whatever, you know, difference it needs to make. Sometimes it may not even be something tangible in that moment, but perhaps it sparks something else that exists down the line. And this kind of plays back to the idea of having this unified whole, that the universe is a unified whole. And if that's the case, then just by stepping up and showing up, it may not be the people you thought were going to hear your voice or hear your idea that take hold of it, but someone else in the room, someone passing by, someone who gets the board notes and says, "Hey, what an amazing idea. Who's this person? Let me talk to them. I really want to know more." You never know because that piece of it is still unfolding, but the unfoldment of your own ideas, your own voice, that has to come from you. You have to kind of show up to bring it to the table. And whatever happens after that, really, it's about being open enough to just accept that it is what it needs to be. And that is the most freeing place you can come to in your life, I believe. When you can just show up and let yourself be present and trust that that's enough. For whatever reason, you're here now. And if you're clear enough and confident enough, then you can make a difference. And you may not know what that difference is, but I would guarantee there is a difference happening when we're really honest and we're really clear. So, that's the reason I believe we need to look at this level, right? This section 4 about rebuilding your core beliefs. The reason is so that you can have a strong sense of how to make those changes because it comes from inside of you, right? And then look at the areas where you might be creating your own limitations and release them. Once you do those two things, you should be really free and untied. You should be able to step into manifesting at a whole new level because you're not putting blocks in your own way. All right. So the next thing we want to talk about is how, right? Here's the accountability challenge. How do we do this? How do we build a better belief system? It's not necessarily easy, but it's simple. It's simple because there's really only two things to do. One, you need to uncover the limiting beliefs that are holding you back. And two, you need to change them by creating a powerful tool, using a powerful tool, to create a new belief. So in our program, the Power Plan, we talk about power affirmations. And the reason we use power affirmations is because it's literally like dripping water on a seed, right? It's like nurturing an idea until it grows and it's strong enough to grow on its own and bring fruit in your life. So that's why we use power affirmations. On the flip side, how do we uncover limiting beliefs? Well, most of them, and probably many of them, would be very obvious for most people, I think, because if you stop long enough to look at where your train of thought goes when you consider making a change, you'll be able to recognize which thoughts are holding you back and which thoughts are challenging you and pushing you forward. So we don't always have powerful beliefs that are all, kisses and roses necessarily. We can have a belief in something being true and right, like speaking our mind, for example, or being honest. It's not always easy to be honest, but it's a simple thing, tell the truth. Pretty simple. Conversely, if we have a belief that we should never be honest because people won't like it, especially in certain situations, right? Like, don't be honest at work. Don't tell your boss the truth, what have you. Then that's a limiting belief, right? It holds us back because the challenge is if we say don't be honest, people won't like it if you're honest. Let's say maybe that's the belief, right? If you're honest, people won't like you. You should always be nice. You should always make sure that everybody's happy. And, if that kind of plays along into the idea of don't be honest, then you're going to limit the opportunities for yourself. And you're also going to limit the opportunities for other people because you're here, like I said, to create and bring something to the world. If you're holding back even a piece of it, and, I would say that being honest is a huge component of our lives, then you are missing out not only on your own engagement in the world, but then the counter engagement, right? The association with other people, the ability to cooperate with other people and to communicate clearly with other people because you're not being honest. So one, of course, being honest, being a powerful and positive belief. The other being a limiting belief because it's holding you back. So hopefully that helps you to understand, like when we look at a belief and we want to know, is this limiting to me or is it positive? Well, if somebody says, well, I'm always honest, and sometimes that can be a bad thing. I would say that being honest is always a good thing. However, it could lead to difficult situations. That doesn't mean that it's limiting you. It probably is opening more opportunities than you'd imagine, because even if the response to something that you're honest about feels negative, it's still expanding your possibilities. It's not taking them away. And that's the key. So look at things in your life and say, is this idea, is this belief that I'm holding me back from things, keeping me stuck in a box per se, or is this allowing me to move forward? Because even talking honestly, I'm not saying negatively, but necessarily honestly with your boss and maybe having a difference of opinion isn't necessarily going to mean that you're going to get fired. Now, doesn't mean you're not. But if you can't even speak honestly with someone, then that means you're always holding back. You're always one step behind what's really happening, being really present. So that is a limitation. Another belief might be, some simple beliefs that people have, and they can actually be fears. But a fear is just a belief, a negative belief typically, about a situation. And let's say that you have a belief that flying is, dangerous to the point of being completely afraid to fly ever. Well, obviously, there's a lot of the world out there and a lot of places you can only get to really by flying. So you've literally physically limited yourself from expanding your life because you will not fly. So then therefore the belief that flying is dangerous is a limiting belief. So hopefully that again makes it clear as to what's a limiting belief and what's possibly a potentially helpful belief that is not necessarily, again, a nice belief, but it's just a belief that gives you more opportunity, opens more doors, if you will, and allows you to be more real in the world. So look at the beliefs that you have and start to catalog those beliefs that are holding you back, are limiting in their nature or scope. And those are the ones that we're going to use for this accountability challenge. So pick, if you can't pick more than 10, that's fine, but pick at least 5 to work on this week. So take 5 of these beliefs that you uncover and start to ask yourself bigger questions, right? So let's go back to the idea of honesty. So being honest is dangerous. Let's say that's the belief that comes up. One way to start the conversation in your own mind is, how do I know this? So first look at how you know that to be true. It may automatically dissolve when you ask that question, right? You might literally lose the belief just by shining that much of a light on it. If not, then perhaps the like I said, the comment comes up that, you think to yourself, well, because when I'm honest, people don't like me. Okay. So we can use that now. We have something to work with. And that's where we would go about creating a power affirmation. So you could use that statement now and turn it on its head. With the power affirmation, we can say, do you believe that every time you're honest, it causes people not to like you? So think about that and say, probably let's say in this scenario, no. There are certainly times when being honest helps people appreciate you even more because they need that feedback or they want that feedback. They appreciate that you're honest. So we could then turn that into a power affirmation by simply stating, when I'm honest, people appreciate me more, or people appreciate me more when I'm honest, right? There's a power affirmation in there. So now what do? We've got our negative belief or limiting belief. We've turned it into a power affirmation. Now what? What's the next step? Well, here's the next step in the regular process. And then what we're also going to do is add an accountability challenge to the last piece of this. So the next step would be to write that out somewhere that you can see it. Whether that's a Post-it note, a notepad, a piece of paper, or whatever it is, and post it, literally tape it up or post it somewhere where you're going to see it every day. So now, At this point, once you get through your list, you should have 5 limiting beliefs, 5 power affirmations. So take those 5 power affirmations and post them wherever you can. Now, one way to do this is to do that in a place that you walk by on a regular basis. So let's say your bathroom mirror or maybe your closet door, someplace that in the morning or throughout the day you're passing this spot. If one catches your eye in particular as you're doing your regular day-to-day routines, then my suggestion next is to take a moment, take a nice deep breath, and stop and read it out loud 3 times or more until it feels true, until you're really connecting to that one particular one that stood out to you. And then go on your day and continue to do this. Now, on occasion, you're going to want to read through them, but even by having them in a place that you see them, your mind and your eye is going to capture that information, and it's going to be like a little dripping faucet. And if you ever had a dripping faucet, you put a cup, right, in the bottom of a faucet that's just tiny little drip at night. By the time morning comes around, the cup is full, if not over full, with water. All those little drips are making a difference. So every time you've walked by and just caught a glimpse of those affirmations out of the corner of your eye, it's going to start making a difference. So your challenge really is just to create the affirmation and then follow the process and allow yourself to be connected to them as often as you can. Now, as far as the accountability piece goes, if you so choose, and this is completely up to those individuals who are listening to this, if they choose to do this and they really want to get even deeper involved in it, is to take a limiting belief, post it on the Facebook page or the discussion board, and then add to that the power affirmation you came up with for 2 reasons. One, it's great to share so people can see kind of what you've come up with. And secondly, if you'd like, what I will do is also read through all of those and give you guys some feedback, on the ones that I see. And then I will be able to help you even maybe tighten up your power affirmations. So I'll do a little, one-on-one with you guys. I'll either, shoot you a message, or if we're on Facebook, I'll go ahead and, reply to your message there as well. So do take me up on that. If you want to, and get that extra feedback so that you can have some really strong affirmations for yourself. And the great thing about affirmations is once they've taken hold, they're yours. You own them. That belief now has been converted, if you will, into something powerful that's yours to hold on to again until it serves its purpose. So when we talk about building better beliefs and we talk about re-engaging into stronger core beliefs, we really want to just kind of imagine ourselves as gardeners going through and kind of pulling out the weeds, if you will, of negative thoughts and that negative chatter, and planting new seeds that are going to grow into, fruitful plants for us and allow us to have even more opportunity, more potential, stronger, field of growth, if you will, based on those new beliefs and those new ideas that we're planting. So take the advantage and take the time that you need to really investigate where perhaps some of these core beliefs have been challenging you and holding you back. And as always, just so you know, and everybody knows on the call here, I'm always available for one-on-one session, with people via my website, or, as part of the weekly live coaching session submission qualifications. So feel free to take advantage of those 2 things if you'd like and get a little more assistance. That's the idea here, is really to help you create this process as your own, so that when you're finished with your 90-day program and you still have access to all of these, videos, etc., that you get to use it and make changes down the line for years to come. So with that in mind, I'm going to go over just a quick few questions that we have here tonight. And excuse me, just get these out here. Okay, so one question that has come up and I wanted to share just to clarify for everyone is, how do you get the replays of past calls? So two ways. If you have, which of course, if you're listening to me now live, if you've registered for this call, and let's say for some reason you're having difficulty with audio, etc., and you have to drop off the call, or maybe you had something come up and you didn't get a chance to actually make it to the call, then you will automatically receive an email link to go log in and download or view, excuse me, the replay of this call. And that's one way. For a few hours or a few days, excuse me, after every call, I'm going to be posting a replay on the Facebook group. So if you don't already belong, you haven't already requested access, you can request access to the Facebook group, which is Group Power Plan, and then I will give you access to that. And on the night of the call, typically that same night, I will post the replay link. Again, you can go to the replay link and listen to the call again, or down at some point in the future. Basically, that particular link though will only be good for 3 days. So keep that in mind. You want to make sure that if that's the avenue you're going, that you get on that right away and hop in within the next day, 24 to 74, or 24 to 72 hours, so you can make sure you get that call. The last way to do it is for that particular month. So each month, August, etc., you would be able to go back to the first week, second week, third week, fourth week, depending on where we are, just throughout that month by going back to the discussion board. So in the discussion board, where we list the links to the calls, the replay will be available via that link as well throughout the month. So those are your options for getting to the replay. Again, first, if you've registered, you'll automatically get an email sending you to the link. Second, you can go to the Facebook page and download the link there, or click on the link there, excuse me. And third, you can always go back into the discussion topic for the month for the live call registration links and pick each one, whichever one you wanted to look at through the month. But those will all change and be updated for the next month. So just keep in mind when you see that for August, it's going to be August, and then they'll be gone. And then we'll have September, and then October, November, December, etc. So we'll have each month up for that, just that 1 month. So hopefully that helps. If you're for some reason either unable to, or you miss part of the call, then you'll be able to get in there and find a way to get back to the replay. Okay, so that's one question. How do I know it's a limiting belief? I think we talked about this a little bit. I actually added this into tonight's call. I think the question really is, can I mess up, right? And can I mess up and take away a belief that's positive? I would doubt it, but the reality of it is, if you're adding a new belief that's positive, you're not going to harm yourself. So don't worry about like taking away a negative belief that's not negative or limiting. I think that if you have a sense in your own, kind of yes and no in your own heart that this is not helping you, then please, by all means, try a new belief. Try to add a new idea, a thought, pattern that is more positive and opening. Okay, so and then where do beliefs come from? We didn't talk about this very much on the call, but I do in the video, and that really a little bit like we talked about, in the sense that the beliefs are basically set in a couple of ways. One, we either are imparted with them. Some people think that we're, again, with the idea of the conscious, the subconscious, and then the universal conscious, that in the universal consciousness there are core beliefs that have kind of been created throughout time, so kind of archetypical beliefs. So there are those beliefs, depending on what your ideas are about that. Then there are the beliefs that we are given, right, as we grow, as we're children. People impart beliefs to us, primarily, I would imagine, to guide us through growing up. And then there are the things that as we grow ourselves, we learn by testing what's safe, what's not safe. Then we kind of come up with our own ideas and sets of belief as we grow. So, by the time we're quote unquote adults, we have new beliefs that we're building. So beliefs can come from different avenues. All have the potential to be positive and uplifting as well as limiting. So we really do kind of have the opportunity to be aware and look at them and make that change when we review how they affect us. How are they making it better for us, or how are they limiting us? So that's really, an easy litmus test, if you will, about whether or not a belief is serving us. So find the beliefs that serve you, create beliefs that will allow you to move forward again, to kind of to stretch your idea of what is possible, and take advantage of the challenge. See if you can maybe get some beliefs and some new power affirmations out there that will change your life simply by allowing you to open to some new possibilities. And do use the Facebook group or the discussion boards to post those, and I will be here to review them, pat you on the back if you've got a great power affirmation. I'm definitely not above, giving acknowledgement for that, but I will also be there to help you if I think that maybe we can tweak it a little bit to make it more powerful and more opening. So thank you all for showing up tonight. Again, affirmations can be posted on the Facebook group or the discussion board, either way. Keeping an eye out for those. And this replay, as well as the others, will be available shortly online. So thank you so much. Have a great night, and we'll see you next week.